All right, hey, welcome. This video is about chapter 21. So let's get to chapter 21. 21 is all about epidemics. The main idea of an epidemic is a situation where we have someone who's exposed to something. For the most part, we're in technology, so we're interested in people being exposed to like ideas via social network. They are exposed to, say, the use of a technology. And given that exposure, this person has a probability of infecting other people. The properties of this person within their social network influence the chance that other people will be exposed. So we have more of a chance of exposure if the person, quote, infectious, has more edges, meaning they're in contact with more people. They also might have a higher chance of exposure if they have more time spent. One of the ways we might think about time spent is how many messages they're sort of trading back and forth. And then we can also echo back to chapter 18 and remember that there's this idea of, there's some people that have a higher quality in their network. Sometimes we call it centrality, and there's various other rules for it. We might as well call it a super spreader here, though. And a super spreader would have what we'd call a power law distribution, or create a power law distribution, meaning there are certain people that are going to really be able to spread ideas and technologies, and therefore, we'd fit them in the situation. Remember, 20% of the people have 80% of the impact on what's going on. So that's, sort of the main idea of what we're after here. A large part of the book chapter is discussing the SIR model. The SIR model is quite simplistic, and here is an example just shown on the screen. We've got a population of 50. We've got the infected person, and you can see where the infected person randomly, in this case, infects 2 people in each round. And you can see that, the number of infected people sort of goes up with that little exponential bump, hopefully, or a lot of us are used to. And then we can see, the amount of people that have actually had the disease, that recovered thing. This is also, you should be seeing this. And this is, again, these are power law distributions here. And so this is a nice way to say, like, okay, just in an aggregate sense. So this is aggregated across an entire population. Like I said, the graph you're seeing is only for a population of 50 people. And it doesn't recognize the idiosyncrasies of the social networks here. We have sort of this constant R value. The reproduction rate is this, relatively constant. It might vary randomly, round to round. You can put that in your model depending on how you like it. But we know as social networking analysts that people's attitudes, what they're doing within the network, the behaviors, everything varies, according to their position in the social network. So it's hard for us to start to say, look, this is going to hold for an entire population. This might hold for a given cluster, and in a way, I hate to say this, but I'm not a big fan of this just general, like it's a pretty crude instrument, the SIR model, but just recognizing that there is a general mechanism of people. And yes, we can break it down to say, look, within various clusters, we would have a situation where certain individuals, here are more likely to be in contact with each other. And so hopefully you saw that on your homework assignment. That is, that this R value is really a lagging measure of what's going on. It's sort of a post hoc thing to say, what's going on now. You might have noticed in the last, the pandemic that was going on, you would see these R values. And what's happening is people like us are estimating what the reproduction rate is. We might be trying to estimate it right now because we're trying to look and see, is the number of infections expanding or contracting? Again, we might be looking at it right now, having looked at what's happened, in the past, maybe the past few months, looking at other measures, people's, general movement rate and other things. Again, this is a really crude instrument, but it's certainly effective. You can see many cases where it works okay. So the SIR model is great, but if you just, you bump it back up to that little, branching model, that's actually, if we're thinking an actual social network, that's a much better explanation of it. We also have this Wright-Fischer model. The Wright-Fischer model is actually kind of cool. It's a nice way to show that we can have these situations where it's almost like you might think about variations and eliminations of variations. So this is a really old population ecology model. The one you're seeing on the screen here, we start out with, I think there's 9 maybe, what is that, 2, 4, 6, 8, that looks like about 10. There's 10 different sort of, quote, genes. For some reason there's 2 red ones, maybe one of those is orange. Yeah, it must be orange, purple, dark purple, violet, okay. The starting row has all 10. The next generation is going to sample from the preceding generation with replacement, meaning, you start at the next row and you say, okay, out of those 10, I'm going to pick one. But you can see where by the second generation, we already have the situation where, 1, 2, 3, 4 of those didn't get picked. And so as it chains down, you'll see eventually the purple ones just kind of take over. You can see it's kind of cool, I thought, as you go down, you're like, hey, look, the purple ones and the green ones. The green is starting to grow, go big and strong here, almost taking over the purple, but then the green fades out. Eventually, over time, we're going to say one, quote, variant survives this. Now, this is a model. This is in a lot of ways like the Schelling model, meaning it doesn't really have a backup predictive theory. It's just saying if we do this, we kind of get population dynamics. And this one, to me, is interesting in the sense that it does show the power law distribution, how that can be completely random. So if you look at this diagram here, the purple is now the huge number of observations, and then the next one down is going to be the green, then we're going to go the red, it looks like, and then the blue-green. You can see where a lot of representatives of purple, and then it just goes down. So what I would say in this one at least, as much as I really didn't like the Schelling model because it was pretending to do based on behavior, I would say this one is like your baseline of, this is what happens if just random stuff happens. And so if you're trying to explain something, you got to beat, random stuff happening. So that's a Wright-Fischer model. Now in another form of this actual Wright-Fischer model, they came up with this Mitochondrial Eve idea. And so the Mitochondrial Eve idea is like, okay, if you trace human DNA right now on the mitochondrial DNA, so the part of the DNA you inherit from the mother's side, you can trace back and say, somewhere back there is like the mother that was the mother of everyone that exists now. And it kind of makes sense in the Wright-Fischer model sense, right? That is, we would say, look, okay, here's this mitochondrial, quote, Eve, and then her descendants, survived up until this day. As a social network analyst, I might be interested to say, look, here's a technology or a way of behaving in social networks that exists now and has taken over, thinking of evolutionarily stable things and things disappearing. And I might say, like, look, given that this is happening, what is the competition and how did it beat it out? And so, we might have had some discussion in the preceding about, Blockbuster video versus Netflix and how Netflix really beat Blockbuster by having this mail order thing with a lot of different movies to choose from. And Blockbuster was like you went there and there was, tons of one video and not much else of videos that weren't popular. And then we could say like, oh, this one eventually didn't survive. What I want to emphasize is the Mitochondrial Eve really has the same kind of limitations as the Markov chain, or Wright-Fischer model. It's a Markov chain also, but we're okay. All of these are Markov chains, but that's fun. So if you go back to that, it does have kind of the same limitations. Actually, the person I got this diagram from, which I should have cited, sorry, has, I'll cite it when I save it, has noted here that, if you look at this diagram, we could imagine a situation where the descendants, like sort of to the on the left side of this, the 1, 2, 3, 4, there's 4 women there that are, you know, the mitochondrial Eve people, and then the 4 women on the other side. Well, if the 4 women on the left side had only male babies, and the 4 women on the right side had all female babies, we would have a situation where the mitochondrial Eve has suddenly shifted, and now the only mitochondrial Eve is the one, now it's the one like that's circled in red. And so it's important to remember in all of these that the correlation does not equal causation, okay? In this one specifically, it's, you know, every daughter has a mother, but not every mother has a daughter. Like what you're observing in reality is what, you know, the roll of the dice may have done, and there wasn't necessarily anything that caused it. So, I think that's enough to say about chapter 21, and in a way, you know, like this is kind of a tie back to chapter 18 in my mind, because we're mathematically saying, you know, the math of chance in a lot of cases is how this works out. And so as we go a little more forward, we'll start getting into actual like cause, like people actually doing stuff that affects this. So see you next time. Goodbye.